All right, let's talk about advertising now. EFF MP Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi has lambasted the advertising industry for actively working to keep black media owners a minority in the sector. Ndlozi was testifying before the South African Human Rights Commission in Rosebank in Johannesburg yesterday on the first sitting of its 4-day inquiry into racial discrimination into advertising. He says black audiences are not as valued as their white counterparts. To take this discussion further, we're joined by advertising executive and South Africa's Promise managing partner, Phumi Mashigo. Ms. Mashigo, thank you so much for being with us. From your perspective, can we start with how transformed is the industry? And I guess here we can make a distinction between in terms of ownership and then in terms of people who are managing the advertising workers on the ground.
You know, Francis, that unfortunately, racism and stereotyping is historical worldwide problem in advertising. Here in South Africa, we've made great strides. In the time that I've been in the industry, and I've been in the industry for about 20 years, we have seen many creative directors, executives coming through the agency, both in terms of the people doing the work, as well as people who own advertising agencies. Unfortunately, though, you know, yesterday, listening to the proceedings, one of the things that came into quite stark focus for me is how the terms of reference of the commission, as timely as it may be in South Africa, unfortunately is a little bit like looking backwards. The media industry has changed so completely. You know, it's what George Soros calls, we are all in the grips of a duopoly between Facebook and Google. And that's where most of the advertising budget goes to. You know, they are the ones who make all of the money. So talking about billboards, talking about newspapers, talking about radio, unfortunately is a very small very small part of the advertising budget.
So that is an excellent point. Do you notice any difference, though, in terms of transformation or not being tone deaf or in between social media, where you say the activity is happening, and traditional media that is being highly focused on in these hearings?
You know, the thing about social media is that it has disintermediated who the media owners are. There are influencers on social media who have more followers than mainstream newspapers in South Africa have distribution. You know, so, and those people are engaging with brands directly, because that's what the environment is like now. The environment is favoring the entrepreneur who has access, direct access to their followers. And they are able to create their own content. They are able to direct how they interact with brands, what they say about the brands, which will resonate with their audiences. You know, and unfortunately, the thing about the social media landscape is that it also is a slave to algorithms. And there have been many papers written over the past couple of years about algorithms and how algorithms kind of, you know, they reinforce bias. So what you like is what they serve you more of. And so that, you know, it gets harder and harder to police when there are so many different players and algorithms are created internationally. We don't create the algorithms. Facebook does, Meta does, you know, Twitter, LinkedIn, they are the ones who create those algorithms. And then the content creators are in charge of how they create content for the audience that resonates with them.
Yeah. Sticking with social media, because this is so interesting, and you're right, so maybe people who are inclined to click on racist ads will actually still continue to receive racist ads. But surely with the demographics in South Africa and the strength of those social media users who can engage directly with brands and give them feedback, you would think that is a huge disincentive to create adverts that are insulting to the majority of the population. Is it?
Well, I think that the way that advertising works, and particularly in the frame of social media, is it's a conversation between the brand, the creator, and the creator's followers. And advertising is sexy. Advertising is a sexy business. It's a provocative business. It's supposed to intrigue. It's supposed to get you thinking. It's supposed to, and because it does all of those things, it is also one of those industries where everybody and their dog has an opinion. No, but where do we draw the line then? Where do we draw the line in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of what people like, what people respond to, and how people respond? And how do we police that when there is such a disintermediated environment?
Yeah. All right, then let's look at traditional media, because it's easier for now, and follow the argument. Even if you follow the demographics in terms of leadership, you said there has been changes, but the accusation is that regardless, ad execs and workers in advertising industries prioritize white consumers. So if you look at what Dr. Ndlozi was saying yesterday, saying 60% of spend goes to Primedia, KFM and Kagiso that owns Jacaranda. And he said the big spenders are engaged in anti-black racism. Your assessment of that?
I think that is also looking at it from a lens that is an old lens, that's old advertising speak. We used to have an advertising where we used to talk about demographics, where we talked about LSMs, and the LSMs and the way that the LSMs were created it was about access, what washing machines and running water and all of that kind of stuff. And all of that has changed, and more advertisers are looking more at psychographics, so the things that make us the same versus the things that make us different. So if the number of listeners on or high-value listeners on Jacaranda versus the number of high-value listeners on another channel is how advertisers then decide where they're going to spend their money. And that is not skewed on a black or white, because people who listen to Jacaranda are not necessarily all white or black. It's just is it
about who's got the money?
In the African language space, but it is also about the numbers. In the African language spaces, where you have only one player, really, you have SABC, which has the spectrum, the full spectrum of all the languages, and then you then have much smaller local stations. So when you only have 100 Rand to spend, you also have to be, as a marketer, you have to be prudent about where you place that money that's going to give you the highest exposure. But again, more and more marketers are actually veering away from the traditional media space, because they'd much rather, you've been on a media browser. It seems that, today when you're on a media browser, it seems like you think about buying a car, and suddenly all the car adverts and all the dealership adverts are showing up on your browser. That's exactly what advertising is now. It's in that algorithm space, and it's tailored to a very narrow casting. So each person is essentially their own curator of media. Whether, you're watching SABC right now on your cell phone or on your device, you're not necessarily just watching it on TV. Yeah. So when the ad spend is then being decided, it is decided on each individual person and their preferences and their likes. And it's backwards to think that preferences and likes are only skewed by race.
Yeah. Ms. Mashigo, are you then saying this problem is being overblown? We don't have a serious problem of racism in the advertising industry? I mean, there are still claims, and even our viewers tonight are talking about the stereotypes, the way black people have been stereotyped in adverts. Is that no longer a problem in your view, or is it still there, but in pockets? I guess we're talking about different pockets now of advertising.
And it's something that the advertising industry, we as executives in the industry, where we are in the room, we're able to make those decisions. We're able to put our foot down. And that's where diversity plays a role. That's why you want diversity in the decision-making rooms. You want diversity in the boardroom. You want diversity in studio where the ads are created. But also, I don't think that it's overblown. I think that unfortunately, we're kind of looking in the rearview mirror while the car's driving forwards. It's not going to get us where we need to get to.
All right, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there, and hopefully we can chat specifically about clicks, developments there in future. South Africa's Promise Managing Partner, Phumi Mashigo, thank you very much for that view.